Hey folks, John here, Old Hickory Forge. Welcome back. So, what's going on today is we're kicking off January's charity build. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this billet, a motorcycle chain Damascus we made in the last video. We're going to cut it in half and we're going to stack it up and do a San Mai billet. If you don't know what a San Mai billet is, basically, traditionally it's when you put a hardenable steel core between two layers of soft steel. This isn't going to be a soft steel, but I just think it'll look cool. And for the core of the knife, what I'm going to be using is a piece of this old file right here. What I've done is I've gone ahead and put it in a vise and hit it with a hammer to snap it just to make sure, you know, it's all one color. Also, I dunked this end in the ferric chloride just to make sure it all etches the same color. Since you never really know what material files are, it's a good idea to test it and make sure it's not case hardened. If it's case hardened, it's unusable and there will be a discernible difference in the way the grain is in the steel. But this is looking pretty good. So we'll cut this in half, grind the teeth off of this, grind it smooth, stack up a billet and get moving. This month, we're donating to Make-A-Wish Foundation. If you don't know what they do, they're an organization and they take terminally ill children and they do all kinds of cool stuff for them. Like they've had kids go out on football fields with professional teams and play. They've had kids meet Batman and Superman and stuff like that. Honestly, I can't imagine a worse kind of hell than being the parent of a terminally ill child. So I just think that's a good place for the money to go this month. But let's get started. A little bit of heat on this thing, barely dull red. You just want to get your flux on before the steel scales up too bad. So, nothing to it really. Alright, first weld, just a few stiff pops. Not a whole lot of force is required at all. Brush it, flux it back in the fire. Second weld, a little more force. So, at this point, I'm positive that the forge weld is solid, it's feeling good, so I'm going at it with a straight peep, starting to draw out the material. Important note, when you're drawing out a San Mai billet, make sure you work from a different side each time you do it. You want to flip the billet over with each heat, because what will happen if you don't is your high carbon steel core will get forced off center, and when you start grinding on this thing, it's just not going to look good. And it can cause problems with the structural integrity of the knife, so just keep track of where your core is and which side you're working on, and you'll be all right. So I've got this thing drawn out about as far as I'm willing to push it. So now I'm just going at it with a flatter. I'm going to take a couple heats doing this, try to get it to a pretty uniform thickness. So here's what we got. I pulled as much length out of it as I could comfortably. It's really lean though. It's going to be a pretty small, light-duty knife. But there's enough there to make something nice out of. So we're going to let this thing cool, and then we'll, at this point, it's going to become a stock removal project. You don't really want to do a whole lot of heavy forging on a San Mai billet because it can distort where your core is. So, you know, if I wanted to, I could probably forge in like a hidden tang to get a little more material to make the blade. But I think this is going to come out just fine. I've got kind of a plan for the knife I want to make, so we're going to move forward. So here's our billet cleaned up on the grinder. It's looking pretty good. I'm thinking like a bird and trout style knife is what this is going to end up being. So like I said, at this point, it's going to become a stock removal project. So I'm going to go through with a cutting wheel, get as rid of much of the excess as I can, and then take this thing to the grinder and start profiling it. So there ended up being a couple of minor surface cold shuts that I had to grind through, but I had to take the edge down pretty thin to get rid of them. So, you know, this is much thinner than I would like for it to be going into the quench, but hopefully it goes well. So here we are after the temper. Brought the tang back to blue. Brought the blade up to about a light straw. A little bit of a discrepancy right there we need to fix with the thickness of the handle, but that won't take but a minute. And, but it's all coming together pretty well. So I forgot to film the acid bath, but basically I just gave this thing 3 10-minute etching cycles, polished it with some 2000 grit in between each one. Looks pretty good. We'll save the big reveal for the end. What I got here, some African Blackwood scales made up. I've already drilled them, pinned them together. So I'm going to go ahead and sand up and true up the front of them so they sit where I want them to on the knife. And then we'll get them pinned to the knife, epoxied on, and shape this thing out. So, got my African Blackwood scales epoxied, pinned. One of the pins bent, but that's okay. It's showing on the other side, so once I start grinding on this thing, it'll be fine. This is 5-minute epoxy, but because it's like 30 freaking degrees here, it's probably going to take quite a bit longer to set up, so I'm going to leave that for 30 minutes or so maybe, and then we'll get to shaping it out. So, here's the knife all done. You can see the motorcycle chain Damascus up here, file steel right here. There's a minor cold shut right there that didn't make itself known until the acid bath, and at this point there's no way to fix it. But it's in a non-critical area of the knife. It's not going to cause any problems. This side, a little bit odd. It looks like we've lost most of our Damascus, but there's still pieces there. Sand mine's a technique I'm really not that practiced at, so I'm still learning. This piece of African Blackwood has a little bit busier of grain than the last piece I used. Looks pretty good. Feels really good in the hand. Should be a, good little bird and trout type knife or something like that for cleaning small game. On your kid, it weighs almost nothing, which is pretty cool. But it's good and sharp, as you just saw. So, that's about all I got for you for this month's charity build. Knife is for sale. Link to the Etsy listing in the description box below. If you'd like to purchase the knife, 75% of the money is going to Make-A-Wish Foundation this month. If you have suggestions for other knives you'd like to see built or other charities you'd like to see donated to, feel free to drop them in the comments. Link to the Etsy and the Patreon in the description also if you'd like to help support the channel. And like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Always more cool stuff coming. And y'all take care.